What's happening, fight folks? It's your boy, the Danny King dad of calling the ring bad, Jack Slack, and it's the Fights Gone By podcast. Had one event on Friday night. We had a UFC event on Saturday night, so we're pretty packed for stuff to recap. News this week, really only one story that matters. I mean, Bellator announced some fights, but the important story is that Chris Cyborg is now apparently a free agent. She was insisting on an apology from Dana White and Joe Rogan before re-upping her contract, and as it turns out, allegedly at least, the UFC have said they're not going to match any offers, and Cyborg is free and clear. On the one hand, that makes sense. They've always had a horrible business, well, not a horrible business relationship, they've always had a horrible relationship, full stop. Dana was always slagging her off before she got to the UFC. The whole thing was Cyborg wouldn't ever fight Ronda. Everyone sided with Ronda. Then everyone changed their minds when Ronda lost, because MMA especially, but women's MMA doubly, very silly game, full of silly fans. But there was all the, looked like Wanderlei Silva in a dress and so on. But then when Cyborg came over, she was actually a surprisingly decent draw, even against these absolute no-hopers they were matching her up against. But that's been the story of her career. There is not a 145-pound division for women. It just doesn't exist. Basically, everyone who's fought her has been either bantamweight or even flyweights. There was that Russian lass they had to fight her in, was that Invicta? But she was tiny. That was embarrassing, that fight. Embarrassing that Invicta did it. But then Invicta's done a lot of embarrassing things over the years. And the thing that you'll notice is that when she fought actually bigger women, like Holly Holm, who made a decent go of it as a featherweight. Well, she's only had 2 fights there, but and Felicia Spencer, who is big enough. That magic power just wasn't there, and she looked still dominating, but just not as amazing. I think, to be honest, if she does get her release, it's probably better for both parties in terms of what they can do next. The UFC obviously don't need 145-pound women's division. The entire thing was farcical, and once they did at one point try and rank the women's featherweight division on their official rankings page, and I think they had like 4 or 5 people in it, and then when Amanda Nunes won the belt, they just quietly took the rankings off the list. But, for Cyborg, you've at least got the promise of 2 possible fights. One is Kayla Harrison, the judoka who is now PFL's Wundergirl. Really hasn't fought anyone decent because I think she's fighting up at lightweight, isn't she? If there's a sparsity of talent at women's 145, you can imagine how bad it gets up towards women's 155. At a certain point, you're fighting Gabby Garcia and George Lucas's daughter. An interesting enough fight, I suppose. The thing with Cyborg, for me, at least, on the Cyborg-Rousey thing, and I think I did a brutally honest assessment of Cyborg versus Rousey at some point for Fightland, but the thing for me was always Ronda isn't very good striking, and this was back when people were pretending that she was, but she isn't very good for striking. She had a good right hand, and people got so butthurt when I said that the other week, but she did have a good right hand, because power is the big separator for women. If you can hit hard, you are like levels above every other woman, in your division. But, her thing was chasing the clinch wildly and then throwing from there. Cyborg's thing was swinging wild and falling into clinches accidentally because she swings so wild. She's a little bit crisper in like the Holly Holm fight, but even Holly Holm was able to take control of the clinches in that fight. So that was, interesting enough. Whether Kayla Harrison could do that, who knows? But, she might even be, I suppose she's bigger than, I don't know. It depends whether she's actually really committing to a weight cut or if she's just choosing to fight up there. As you get that impression with like Felicia Spencer, did not seem like she needed to be at 145 in terms of could make the cut to bantamweight. Might not be pleasant, but probably could make it. Megan Anderson, where does she fit in all of this? But anyway, the other teased possible fight now is Julia Budd, and Julia Budd is pretty good. She was fairly average. She fought Ronda Rousey back in the day, I think, and then she suddenly put on a lot of muscle and became Bellator's women's featherweight champion, probably beating some of these lasses that they put in against her. But again, not an awful lot of talent there, mainly puffed up bantamweights or people who just aren't really very good to begin with. She won one by a front kick to the body the other day, which was awesome. But Yeah, I mean, that's the one that people probably want to see. If you have an investment in the women's featherweight division, and there are only about 8 people who do, that's probably the fight you're thinking about. So let's talk about some fights that have actually happened. I had an interesting week. Friday midday-ish, well, not really midday-ish, Friday daytime, I was thinking, what can I do? Should I start on preparing something for a Filthy Casuals guide or something like that? I could start watching Valentina Shevchenko film. Oh, I really don't want to, though. And then I realised that one was on. So I put that on. I think I caught the tail end of the very first fight. And I just put that on the TV, milled around, jumped on the treadmill, did various things, waited for my Ocado order, and I was just watching the thing through the day. It was really surreal watching a card, like, through a Friday daytime. I've done Sunday daytime, croissant time with Rising. Someone messaged me the other day. Someone commented on something I wrote the other day being like, what's croissant time? But yeah, it was proper weird. It was great fun. I really enjoyed the one event and watching the whole thing through the day, but it also threw my body clock off completely. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, did I just waste a day? I don't know. I mean, I'm going to write about it and talk about it, but I still feel like normally I watch these in the aftermath and I don't have to wait between the fights and so on. But if you didn't see it, that's the one I'm going to be talking more about this week because it was much more interesting than the UFC card, if we're honest. Ayman versus Peringkat was the first fight. That was all right. Mainly just showed how much the ring sucked. It really, really does. I was just watching it in the live chat on Reddit going, oh, there's one of those wall walks that doesn't work in the ring, apparently. Dude just literally wall walking up on the ropes. It works exactly the same, except sometimes they fall through. That's the anyone who pretends the ring stops wall and stall or stops wall walking and so on is just lying. Then you had Ayaka Miura versus Samara Santos. This was a weird one. I called it peak women's MMA because the first round, and I'd say that it wasn't bad. It was just technically bad. No, it was Ayaka Miura came out head and arm through this lass within 30 seconds. The other lass pushed her head back from the scarf hold and threw her legs up and worked into a reverse triangle. So Miura's running around on top in a reverse triangle for the whole round. And they try to reverse triangle each other at the same time. And then the second round started, she did the same again, and she used the scarf hold this time to actually push the wrist down, catch the the leg Americana, where you're bending. The bent arm is pulled back by your knee while your hips go up. You know the one that Felice Herring got caught with by Randa Marcus after talking mad smack. Then you had Miao versus Mitsatic. This was a Muay Thai guy. Well, actually, he did have a decent MMA record, but he came out in the Thai shorts, and the other guy was there to wrestle, and the guy just threw him all over the ring. It was amazing. I said on Twitter, this Thai guy's plan is, at the start of the next round, I'm going to hit this guy, and then he comes out and charges in and just gets taken down easy. Because it's that ticking clock thing, and we'll talk about this with Robbie Lawler, I'm sure, but if you don't make the most of the time on the feet before you're taken down, suddenly you have to make a knockout happen when really you should be setting things up, picking away. And the more you're running in or throwing as hard as you can, the easier you are to time and take down. Some dope throws in that fight though. Miao, he hit an underhook hip throw, and he did it basically on one leg, his whole body bending over with the other guy being thrown over too, and it looked like he almost dislocated his own knee. His knee almost went backwards while he was doing it. Zebin versus Edward Kelly. Right, this card was in the Philippines, and basically most of Team Lakai were on it. I love Team Lakai, but I can't work out. I always say they're the weirdest people in MMA because, firstly, they're a former wushu team, but secondly, their whole game plan is to throw back kicks and then try and scramble up when they're taken down. And somehow they've got it to work against Bibiano Fernandez and Shinya Aoki. But then you watch them fight, and even right up until they win, you're like, how does this guy even win fights? Because Edward Kelly, I think he was a champion in one, or he might have been in contention in one at one point. Yeah, Zebin just ragdolled him, and they basically gave Edward Kelly a way out. I think it was Umeki, whoever. The one ref did all the Team Lakai fights. It was pretty obvious what was going on there, but Edward Kelly was in a turtle. Zebin starts throwing punches at him, I think like one caught him in the back of the head. It really wasn't egregious. And they stopped the fight. They were like, no, he can't continue. We're going to have to go to technical decision. So Zebin picks up the technical decision, but Edward Kelly was still game to fight. It's just so silly. James Nakashima versus Yushin Okami. This was better than I expected because I didn't even know Okami was on the card, and I do not like watching Okami fight. Okami is from the era when just throwing the jab was enough to make you an elite striker. If you remember, like, against Anderson Silva, he just parks up in front of Silva, throws the jab. Silva moves, he plods towards Silva again, throws the jab, and then Silva just times him with a dipping jab. Because there was no feinting at all. There was no, all the stuff that makes a jab good, he didn't have. He just had the jab. But it was working here against James Nakashima. But James Nakashima caught a cool guillotine from the bottom. I think he had both his legs on one side of Okami at the time. But he managed to use this guillotine to turn him over. And I'm watching it going, that's a pretty cool guillotine. And then I realise he's got an S-grip. And I'm like, oh, one of my fucked up wrist brethren. Because I have one fucked up wrist. At the moment, well, I say at the moment, it's been like 2 years now. You just have these things that you're like, yeah, it's getting better, and then it isn't. But I've got one fucked up wrist, and whenever I catch the guillotine on that side, I go S-grip, which is fingertips into the other side's fingers, as opposed to like a gable. Well, in a guillotine, you typically use, I think it's called a seaman's grip, isn't it? Where you, oh no, that's a reach around. No, I think it's called a seaman's grip, where you catch one wrist with the other hand, and you have one hand like holding and anchoring as opposed to both hands anchoring themselves to each other. But I use a S-grip to finish guillotines on that side, just because it mangles my wrist otherwise. And this guy was doing the same, and I was like, oh, this guy's clearly got a fucked up wrist, because you're giving up like the small bony surface area of the side of your wrist. You're turning your wrist over and you're doing it with like where your watch is, which is obviously quite wide. It doesn't have that same pressure. But, we make things work how we must. And he dropped Okami too. They kept going on about Giorgio Petrosian and how he'd been training with Giorgio Petrosian. And then he hits like a 1-2 and they go, that's vintage Giorgio Petrosian. Mitch Chilson, oh, he's terrible. And Michael Chiavello is becoming a caricature of himself. And it gets worse because they are clearly being fed lines like Michael Cole is on WWE. They just have to keep saying, available in 140 countries, or 2 billion potential viewers, or 140 world champions within one. Like, if everyone's a world champion, no one is a world champion. They keep listing like Edward Kelly's wushu record instead of his fight record. Just really strange stuff. Issa versus Taranaka was not great. Another local boy, Honorio Benario, great name. I think he was the champion at one point and won, but he fought Dyson Park and lost. And again, the referee, every time Honorio Benario sticks his head outside the ropes to avoid being hit from like a back clinch, the referee goes, keep your head in, keep your head in, keep your head in, and then does nothing, just lets him do it. And every time Dyson Park, basically anytime Honorio Benario pushed this guy to the ropes, the ref let him do whatever he wanted. Anytime Sung Park turned it around, the ref would go, action, action. And he was doing that like even when the dude was in side control or mounted on Benario. Yuya Wakamatsu pretty much stole the night. He was against Geiji Estakio, who is another decent guy from Team Lakai. And I was saying, like, firstly, Ryo Chonen's in his corner, and Ryo Chonen looks properly weird when he doesn't look weird. He doesn't have the piranha mouthpiece in. He's not bulging his eyes, and his hair's not bleach blonde. He just looks like a normal dude. It's proper weird. But Yuya Wakamatsu, everyone was saying, this guy's got a great right hand. I'm going, he does sort of like, he bounces a bit, he goes in on a straight line, and then he retreats on a straight line. At some point, someone's going to catch him, going back. You just got to wait on the right hand, follow him out with the left hook or with a high kick or something like that. Or just a low kick. You can take advantage of it that way. But just as I'm saying that, he starches the guy with the right hand. And I go, okay, cool, well, that's that decided. You just have to knock him out before you try and exit. Rodtang versus Andrew Miller was decent. Short right hand, very DC versus Stipe-like. Very short right hand, just little right hook. Caught him in close when the guy didn't think there was a punch coming. Danny Kingdad versus Reece McLaren, this was egregious. This was the biggest fuckery that one pulled that night. Because Reece McLaren just worked all over Danny Kingdad, or Kingad, whatever. I swear on the Titantron it said Kingdad, which is why my intro joke was Kingdad. But Danny Kingad, everyone was impressed by like how strong he was. He would come up off the bottom and double leg Reece McLaren like 13 minutes deep into the fight and clearly losing. But most of the fight, Reece McLaren was all over this lad. He was hitting floating guard passes like Gordon Ryan, attacking Darces and shit. He caught him in a Japanese necktie at one point, couldn't finish, but you know who would? Mads Burnell. But yeah, just all over Danny Kingad. And then they announced the decision and Danny Kingad gets it 2-1. And you're like, what the fuck? Well, you know what the fuck. He's the local guy. He's Filipino. They're in the Philippines. They want him going through. So Danny Kingad actually going through to the finals of the Flyweight Grand Prix against Demetrius Johnson, who fought next against Tatsumitsu Wada. Properly weird fight, because Wada gave him a lot of trouble. Like, you know, there are people who are like, you thought that was a close fight. You don't know what you're talking about. Demetrius Johnson was in control all the time. She's like, really? He wasn't. He didn't do any damage. He didn't do much. It was mainly grappling bout, and the closest anyone came to finishing was when they were both on each other's backs at various points, and Wada was on the back for longer. Neither one really almost finished the other. Surprising performance by Wada, because, you know, he was 21-10. He's now 21-11, but did very well. Doing a really cool, like, upper body clinch thing where he had head and arm, basically, you know, and then he would chuck Demetrius Johnson forward onto his hands and get on his back. It hacked me off so much watching people go, oh, it's a decision and it was a competitive fight. Oh, they're going to try and screw DJ here. And you're like, you know why his coach isn't in his corner, right? Because he's there with the judges. He is in charge of the judges. It's absolutely absurd. And I have people telling me, like, it's not a conflict of interest. Then people saying, oh, you saying that DJ needs help? And you're like, well, literally, this was a close fight. There are judges. That's where having your man that's where your coach being in charge of the judges is going to actually make a difference. Eddie Alvarez versus Edwin Folayang. This was great. This and the Haggerty fight. And the Rodtang fight, rather. Well, both of them against each other were the two big fights of the night. Alvarez versus Folayang comes out, looks awkward. You know, he looked exactly like he did against Nasty Yuken, where he's trying to come in and he's getting hit while he's leaping in on the guy. And, you know, for a while back in Bellator especially, it was sort of Eddie Alvarez's thing to get dropped in the first round of every fight he had. And then he'd warm up and you'd go, Jesus, this guy's great. And someone wrote this on Facebook and I liked it because I thought it was brilliant. They said, Jesus, what the fuck is Eddie Alvarez? At one point, you know, he can look like a can and then a world champion within the space of about a minute. It's really weird. But Eddie gets clipped a couple of times coming in with punches. And then he ended up getting back towards the ropes and Edward Folayang storms in on him. Folayang, obviously known for his spin kicks and stuff. Alvarez starts circling along the ropes one way. As Folayang spins to back kick him, he just circles off the other way. It was absolutely beautiful. He did it to RDA. He did it to Chandler. In fact, the reason that he probably won that RDA fight was because he did it about 8 times in that fight. He just kept getting put on the fence and then changing directions and moving out. And RDA is one of the best ring cutters we've seen in MMA. So incredible move. Everyone should be learning from Eddie Alvarez because he does that a lot. But then he got low kicked and, it was a bad one. It was like a low kick and he winced as he went down and was like holding his leg. It reminded me a bit of Royler Gracie versus Sakuraba, where Sakuraba kicked him in the shin and then realized he might be able to even get a stoppage just if he kept kicking. Folayang goes nuts, jumps on him, throws past his guard, starts hammer fisting him, and, Alvarez works his way back to, you know, 2 knees in, but with both feet on one side. It's a position that like, Braulio Estima uses a lot. You know, it's on your way back to guard, but Braulio Estima will let people pass to that position because it's still sort of guard. You know, you've got control of the guy and he's not actually able to murder you or submit you from there. But you can encourage him to like put pressure forward and so on. And that's where Braulio Estima hits all his reverse triangles from, or inverted triangles rather. Did it to Andre Galvao, so obviously works on very high level guys if you can convince them to come forward. But, Folayang, so one arm is blocked out by Eddie's left knee. And then Eddie's right knee and shin are across Folayang's belly. So Folayang can't really hit him with the right hand, so he's just hammer fisting with the left. Eddie reaches all the way under Folayang's left leg, and he hits basically like a lasso tilt sweep, where you just basically, by lifting, or by turning your body and lifting the leg as you keep the arm attached to your knee, or your spider hook or whatever you're using in the gi normally, you can tilt the guy over the one knee that's free, and they can't base on that because they can't lift it out and base further around because they're on it, and then you're tilting them over it. And he takes top position, beautiful pass, very BJ Penn style, shoulder pressure, turn their head away. the shoulder of justice, and then you you walk their knees around so that they point in the other direction, and then you just slide your knee through over the top to go into mount. And he took mount, and Folayang turned his back. And this had been what they were doing all night, just turning their back, giving up the hooks, and then scrambling up eventually. But Folayang just got flattened out and choked. Yuan versus Matsushima was the main event, so we'll do that now because it was crap. Matsushima moved around a lot, didn't do much, then hit takedowns, finally got tired trying to take Martin Yuan down, and then got hit and TKO'd. It was kind of a slog because it came immediately after Rodtang versus Jonathan Haggerty, and this was a bomb-ass fight that you need to see. What was interesting was, obviously, Rodtang is a very experienced Nakmoy. He's been doing this his whole life. And the thing that's fascinating about Haggerty is that he's got 20 fights, but he's not, overwhelming people or anything like that. He's actually picking apart with the long-range teep and switch kick game, which, when you think of a British Nakmoy or someone who competes in Muay Thai, you normally think, or any, Western Nakmoy, you normally think, kickboxer with elbows and knees and some clinch work. There tends to be gravitation towards that, combinations and low kicks and things, because a lot of these gyms are also kickboxing gyms, like Kettles and Knowles Academy and Team Underground. They're all also kickboxing gyms. A couple of them have MMA programs and things like that. Whereas in whereas in Thailand, you're obviously working in a Thai gym where the focus is on Muay Thai, though some of them do also train boxers. But that's sort of very light lead leg, stopping people with teeps, needling them with the annoying teep, stomping on them with the power teep, and then switching for switch kicks and things like that. That's a very sort of traditional Muay Thai style that I would not normally associate with a lot of the Westerners who do well in Muay Thai, like say John Wayne Parr. I say Westerner, it's fucking Australia, but people who are not from Thailand, Farangs, that's what they call them. Not really that sort of style, more as sort of like a kickboxy style with the elbows and the knees and the clinch work thrown in. Whereas I thought for the opening 2 rounds of this, Haggerty was out like traditional Muay Thai-ing Rodtang. And I was saying it's very important that, I'd like to see him tie up. Well, firstly, he fights from a very high stance, Haggerty, and he uses his lead leg as bait. In the same way that some fighters use their head as bait, particularly in boxing. But he uses his lead leg as bait. Rodtang kept throwing these low kicks out in the open, and every time Haggerty he'd just pull that foot back half an inch, and the kick would swing past. And I don't think he connected one in the first round. He was throwing them all the time. But I was saying, anytime they get close to the ropes, you've got to watch that, because the whole thing is that Haggerty's controlling the distance, and then he's having that foot out there in front of him. He's not worried about his head because he's controlling the distance, and then the lead foot or the lead leg is the bait. Once he got moved to the ropes by Rodtang, he ate the low kicks much more readily. He was taking them because he was worried about getting hit in the head, hitting the body, and so on. And I was saying probably best to just tie up from there. Did that in the second round, but then third round, fourth round is just vintage Rodtang, walks dudes down, smashes them, beautiful body shots into flurries, landed a really good body shot that hurt Haggerty very obviously, and Haggerty just got on his bike and started circling. I was impressed how well Haggerty got on his bike, because I'd seen earlier fights of his, and frankly, he's had 20 fights, less than 20 fights, so there hasn't been a lot of time to demonstrate this or even change it if it was a bad habit. But he used to go to he goes to the ropes a lot and then sits on the ropes throwing lead leg kicks and teeps. If the opponent steps down on him, he'll teep them with the lead leg. But he hangs around on the ropes too much. And in this fight, he actually got on his bike and ran. And, you're like, yes, do that, because Rodtang just smashed your liver and you're clearly winded. But Rodtang, he did the John Lineker. He got frustrated and he threw out his arms and was like, stand and fight me. And he did it about 3 times. And you go, no, don't do that. That's not how you finish a fight. The referee will not, what are you imagining? Is the referee going to stop the guy and bring him back to fight you? No, you're just giving him more time to get away. Because I felt Rodtang could have done him there. He had, once you see a guy properly winded, he's not coming back for a little while. It's not like if you get dinged in the head where it takes a little while, but it takes much longer with a good body shot to feel okay again. And it's, good body shots stay with you too through the fight. But 5th round, Haggerty comes out, just wills his way through, gets back to the science, moving beautifully. Rodtang didn't really do much in the 5th round, and then that was the final bell. Fantastic fight. I mean, Rodtang won on the decisions. I'm not going to complain too much because I thought it was a brilliant fight, and I thought what Rodtang did was very impressive. I had it 3-2 Haggerty. Because I gave him 1, 2, and 5, and I gave Rodtang 3 and 4, but he also got a knockdown in, I think it was 4 or 3. Actually, when he knocked him down, I thought Haggerty wasn't even going to get up. He was like hands on head going, ow, and then he finally got up. But, you know, I've had some interesting views about this. A lot of people, whose opinions I respect had the same thing as well. I respect their opinions more because they had the same thing as me. But then I've had a couple of people be like, actually, I think I'll find in Muay Thai scoring they'd have given Rodtang that round. I'm going, I don't think so. Like, Muay Thai scoring used to be like a cop-out. You'd go, well, the reason Ramon Dekkers didn't win is because in Muay Thai, kicks are valued more highly than punches and aggression. And in this one, they're doing like the exact opposite. They're going, actually, I think you'll find Rodtang won because, won the 5th round, this is, because aggression is scored more highly than kicks. You're going, I think you're just, it's kind of like, you know, the weird Stockholm syndrome that Japanese martial artists get about the Japanese. They're just like, oh, it's a Japanese thing. And you go, no, it's just bollocks that they're making up. But yeah, most of the people I knew had a draw, and we were all going into like the cards going, oh, what did you have? Oh, it's a draw. And then, as they go to the cards, they go, nope, there's no draws allowed. And you're going, how does that work? Because you've already said you score it on the 10-9 system. The Muay Thai and the kickboxing bouts, not the MMA bouts. MMA bouts is pride scoring, which is closer to finish, which gives you a better case for what's his name? For Tatsumitsu Wada beating Demetrius Johnson, because neither of them really came close to finishing, but Tatsumitsu Wada was on his back for a long time, and that's the worst position. And he landed a good uppercut at one point. That was the lot in the fight, basically. But if you're doing it round by round, and then you go, oh, we're also not having draws, then how does that work? Like, it's a point-based system. You can't, so basically the way it works is they go, if the judges can't decide a winner, the judges will decide a winner. So basically after you score a draw or whatever, you have to go, yeah, well, maybe give it to Rodtang then. You know, Rodtang, to be honest, both of them deserved, accolades and, money for winning for this fight, but, Rodtang picks up the win. That sets up some, well, it doesn't really set up some interesting fights because, you know, the people I want to see in fight aren't in one at the moment. But can you imagine Haggerty versus Tenshin for another shot at Rodtang? And I was going like, you know, remember how they, the Tenshin fight when they wanted to get away from Rodtang winning? I think they scored it a draw and they had the extra round. The extra round is the classic Japanese way of just eking your boy over the line. They used to do that with, Masato against Borkau. Borkau kicked the shit out of him, and they were like, we had it as a draw, extra round, please. And then Borkau just beat him up even more. And Sakuraba versus Guy Mezger, that was another one where they tried to do that. But yeah, good on Rodtang, deserves a belt. And frankly, Haggerty never looked out of place against a guy with 300 fights. He's got 20. You know, this lad, if he keeps it up and he doesn't, like, suffer, you know, some horrible, like, multiple concussion streak of fights or in training or whatever, he stands, you know, he stands a good chance of being maybe the best kickboxer or Nakamura out of Britain ever, possibly. I'm wondering how exclusive his contract with One is, and I'm also wondering how he feels about, like, kickboxing compared to Muay Thai. Because he doesn't do a lot of clinch stuff, but he does do a lot of elbows. I'd be very interested to see how his style went over in, like, K1. Who's at his weight in K1? Oh, Takeru. So Takeru, yeah, I mean, that could be fun. Anyway, if you haven't got the point yet, there were some really bloody good fights on that one card. You should check them out. And watching it with hindsight, or in retrospect, rather, you can skip all the bollocks between the fights. Like, the fucking advert, they played it like 8 times with the kid going, I'm a girl and I'm picked on at school, but now that I've seen that Angela Lee can become world champion, I can be a doctor. Shit like that. So bad. I get on that every time, but every time it comes on, I go, I can't believe this. And then you had a UFC card, which wasn't amazing. I really only focused on the main card for this one. What did I see? Oh, dope triangle choke from Matt Schnell. I remember that one. Mickey Gall beat some lad and then called out Diego Sanchez again. You're like, why, Mickey Gall? Why are you even here? Kennedy Ncheku won a decision over Stosic. That was just shite to watch. When this lad came out, I was like, Stosic is here? And then I went, oh, wait, no, I'm thinking of Soldich. the guy who's over being exciting in KSW. Yeah, just not impressive at all. Scott Holtzman versus Donghyun Man. I thought this was good fun, actually. Holtzman was good fun. I remembered him from beating, was it Alan Patrick, the really long capoeira guy who just had terrible striking, and Holtzman just battered him. But this was a really good fight. I mean, really good, but not necessarily from one man's perspective. You know, Scott Holtzman's corner probably shouldn't be going, that's really good, because he was just trading with Dong Hyun Man for much of this fight and couldn't get him out of there. It was Dong Hyun Man's eye being swelled shut just by repeated bashing that finally called the fight off between rounds. Gerald Meerschaert versus Trevin Giles was proper weird. I've seen Meerschaert, must have seen him like a dozen times before at this point, but I was really confused. he lets the guy take him down or just flops to his back. And then seems to let the guy pass his guard. And it was one of those situations where, like, has this guy massively overestimated his ability? Because I've seen that before where guys pull guard, they're playing very relaxed, the guy hops over their guard, they're still very relaxed, and then suddenly they put themselves in an arm triangle by accident. But Gordon Ryan sometimes does. When he's smurfing these local tournaments, he just lets the guy pass and then mount. Because if you've got your legs flat when they're in side control, it's almost impossible to resist the urge to mount. And then what he'll do is he'll do that little bump escape into a leg entanglement and attack the heel hook. But Gerald Meerschaert, really interesting reversal. Like, the guy was, I think it was side control, and he basically put the guy's elbow over his head and then bridged through so that he hit like an arm triangle, landed in an arm triangle. It was very similar to what Bas Rutten did to, was it Yamada back in the day? Like a sweep into an arm triangle from the bottom of side control. But yeah, it just went back and forth with it. I was watching it and going, what even am I watching? I mean, I think I'm entertained, but I don't. It's a really weird fight. Then finally picked up a guillotine at the end, like perfect. Basically what that Danaher DVD was all about, getting the wrist all the way up on the collarbone before you even catch it. Caught it from a chancery. Well, chancery classically is just like any hold of the head where you're choking, but what BJJ Scout calls chancery, and I like that, so I'm stealing it. But it's instead of having like a front headlock with one arm over the opponent's arm and then one arm on the head, you know, one inside and one outside, you have an underhook and the chin basically, and that's a really good position to start punching through for a short guillotine, you know, an arm, no arm guillotine, as in their arm isn't in. Nasrat Hakapara, you know, Halal Kelvin Gastelum versus Joaquim Silva. This really, I mean, stopped at the beginning of round 2, but I didn't even think this fight really got going. You know, I was going, okay, we're establishing some patterns here, and then he just blasts him in the face with an overhand left. Lovely stuff. Jim Miller versus Clay Guida. Well, we were talking about this. We were like, does he want to fuck around trying to take Jim Miller down when Jim Miller's got great guillotines? But both of them cracked each other square in the jaw right off the bat. Clay Guida with a nice counter right hand over the top of Miller's left hand, and then he pursued Miller and got cracked with the left hand on top of his right hand. It was both of them hitting basically the same counter opportunity. And then Covington versus Lawler. I thought Covington looked amazing in this. I thought Lawler looked pretty bad, to be honest. Oh, well, I don't want to say bad. You know, I thought he looked in good shape, and I thought he looked sharp, but I thought his decision making was pretty terrible. You know, he's like standing on the fence, slipping punches and rolling his head. And he's never been good at that, to be honest, the whole rolling and weaving thing. He'll put like the wrong hand up to guard and get hit in the side of the head while he's doing this rolling stuff. And he never really creates opportunities to counter off it. But, and also, you know, we were talking all last week about body shots. Dom brought it up on the broadcast. He was like, he should hit the body so that he has the underhook there ready, you know, and he's not swinging for the head and Covington's ducking under. But Lawler didn't throw like one body shot in the whole fight. And then, you know, when Covington came at him, he'd just stand on the fence with his feet like on the fence, trying to slip punches. And you're going, no, run. That's what you do. You know, you want to spend as little time near the fence as possible, because Covington's whole game is to shoot onto the fence. You know, he doesn't hit a lot of takedowns out in the open. He doesn't, you know, Habib, Kamaru Usman, we're in this very interesting phase where everyone can now wall walk, with the exception of a few like Yair Rodriguez, and Ortega doesn't really do it either, but everyone now knows how to wall walk and will wall walk, because everyone is like fence wrestling every day. I think, yeah, most places do that like every day now, because it's just such an integral part of MMA, whether you're trying to stay on the feet or trying to get people down. But that means that this style that like Covington, Usman, Habib all use, you know, not the same, not identical by any means, but we're talking like the difference between Johnny Hendricks sitting on Lawler's legs as he tries to get up, and Covington, Usman, Habib just using that, constantly moving, changing position. Every time the opponent gets up, they know where they're going, so they're ahead of them. And I think, you know, we're basically some stuff is going to have to shift, and people are going to have to start doing new things off the fence or to get off the fence that are a little bit less formulaic than just the build-up stand, try and turn back into them sort of thing. I'd be really interested to see someone like Rob Whittaker, again, just like the peak of that turn your back, stand up, turn back into them style, against a Habib or an Usman of his size. But, that's what they teach well at ATT, where Lawler was for a very long time, and Covington still is. So Lawler's game really improved when he went there and started learning to wall walk. Kyoji Horiguchi's game massively improved by going there and learning how to wall walk. He now fights in a ring and still wall walks in a ring. But, I think we're going to get to an interesting spot where back in Ken Shamrock versus Tito 1, Tito was so known for pushing people towards the fence and elbowing them. And this was before the wall walk was really a thing. But Ken Shamrock's answer was to to hold Tito down in his guard, keep his posture broken, and then reach out with the arm and leg on the same side towards the fence and turn himself around 180 degrees away from the fence. I think we might get to a phase where that's sort of the tactic, or, if you're being taken down, dive away from the fence. I think it'd be very, because the guard is still the guard and guard passing is still guard passing. And I think you're a little bit less limited there than you are in, the fence exchanges where everything's a little bit slower and the guy can see what you're doing while you're doing it. But I've been watching some Covington, in the week up to this fight. I was thinking about doing a Filthy Casuals guide to him, didn't get around to it. Because it's always timing with these things, when I start watching them or when I finish watching their fights, and then I go, fuck, there's not enough time now. But yeah, I was really impressed by him, to be honest. I thought his striking looked very good for what it was. I mean, even in the last seconds of the last round, he had the energy to do a 540 kick into a spinning back fist. So I was like, wow, okay, where did that come from? But, he does a lot of cool stuff like the high kicks into the drops on the hips. Beautiful single finish where he slung to the high ankle position and then kicked out the standing leg. But really what impresses me about him is that he's not moving at 100 miles an hour for 5 rounds. It's not like Sean Shirk working 100 miles an hour per round and then almost dying in the corner in between. He is he's leaning on Lawler. He's hanging on Lawler. He's making Lawler work harder than him, which I thought is really impressive, as opposed to just running out and trying to overwhelm them with pace and tiring yourself out in the process. There was a bit where he had a collar tie. He kept getting into those close range exchanges with Lawler, and there was a bit where he had a collar tie, and Lawler tried to yank his head back as quick as possible, and the arm went with him. It was clearly not Colby just holding on as hard as possible, but Colby was just sort of leaning on him. And that sort of summed up the difference for me. Robbie Lawler is working really, really hard. Covington is working hard, no doubt, but he's also making Lawler carry his weight more than he's trying to just push Lawler around into different positions. And then apparently he said something awful about Matt Hughes afterwards. I mean, I struggled to feel sorry for. Well, actually, I did watch that UFC short they did on Matt Hughes, and it was kind of it was impressive how real they were with it. His wife was he wasn't nice before the crash either. But yeah, I mean, you know why he's doing it. You know why he's doing all of it. Stop getting upset. It's an act. It's Conor McGregor back in the day. People used to be Conor McGregor, world-class trash talk, blah, blah, blah. I never watched it. The only time I ever watched it was when I had to write a book about it. And I was just so tired from watching all these press conferences. Because you're not dealing with the next Oscar Wilde. You never are in prize fighting. There are people who will make you chuckle, like Tyson Fury does occasionally. But, it's not... These guys aren't out there writing biting satire. They're just preparing quick one-liners and then shoehorning them into press conferences. And, it's even worse when guys do them in post-fight interviews because they get the question. You can watch them during the question thinking about the thing that they're going to say. And you're going, this guy's definitely not going to answer this question. And then so-and-so will get done with their question and they'll just have the prepared spiel coming. But yeah, not bad, I thought. He got some good finishes on the card. And Covington Lawler was... sad if you like Robbie Lawler, but pretty impressive if you're not sold on Colby Covington yet. He's a good fighter. I think, the other thing is Robbie Lawler, people are going, he's done now, or whatever. And you got to remember that his UFC title run was a comeback. We all assumed he was pretty much done anyway. He's already had a career resurgence, so don't be too shocked that now at 37 with however many dozen fights, he's, not the force he used to be. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for today. We'll be back later in the week to talk about the upcoming Shevchenko fight, so you won't want to miss that. If you want to get on the Patreon, we're going to be doing some interesting stuff this week. Got an Eddie Alvarez article going up because that sweep was so dope, and I just want to look at a little history of those sweeps. BJ Penn hit a very similar one from Spider Guard. He used to do a lot, hit it in the Mundial's final, I think. And it's not dissimilar to, as it is It's very closely linked to Spider Guard stuff, but it's not dissimilar to Nog's favourite sweep from like the double bicep ride, which he hit on Fedor several times, or even the little twist sweep that, or the John Wayne sweep that you occasionally see from half guard with the knee shield. Anyway, so we'll be talking about that later in the week, and also some other stuff. So get in on the Patreon now to support the podcast. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any point in time, fightprimer.com. Which reminds me, go read that Haggerty study if you're a Patreon boy, because again, really fucking good. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Lucy Pudalova's ability to entertainingly lose bless.